Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So really quickly, there seems, we're just going to go over a couple quick things that I noticed from the homeworks and some suggestions. One is if there's any confusion about what a WBIC is weather-based irrigation controller, that's not a brand, that is a type of controller. So just a heads up on that. And then secondly, there's a difference between 1.5 inches of irrigation / rainfall. Like if you took a rain gauge, you would fill that up to 1.5 inches. Now that's going to penetrate much farther than 1.5 inches into your soil. So we're talking about I think it's a volume, is that right? As far as like what 1.5 inches of irrigation looks like. But the goal is to get, once again, to get the water down 18 to 24 inches, way down past that original root ball, and send those roots down so it can, let's see, yeah, so it can just get itself ready and create a vigorous root structure. Thank you. Thank you, Eric, for blanking out on what you wanted to say mid-sentence. I tend to do that. So here we are. We're talking about weeding. I got a lot of your homeworks, and you know, some people are in Pasadena, some people are in LA DWP, some people didn't have clients, so you made up a scenario, which is great, you know, and everybody, you know, did a pretty good job of assessing what, you know, it's pretty straightforward really once you look at it. You know, if you're going to apply for the turf program, they have pretty strict rules, and Martha did a great job of making that clear. And then if you're not, you can do the nozzle replacement, things like that. Okay, so I'm not going to go over anybody's individual homework here. I tried to respond to the homework that you sent to me. Let's see. Okay, here we are. Lesson 6, weeding and integrated pest management. So objectives of this lesson: identify 2 potentially weedy native plants. Manage weeds through knowing their life cycle and cultural conditions. Identify the key conditions and pests that are most commonly seen in native gardens, and use IPM techniques successfully throughout the native garden and its life cycle. I think also one of the major objectives is just to point you to the place where you can get these answers yourself. We have a lot of this information in your workbook, but also it's the UC IPM website. And I also found an interesting blog, UC Weed Science, and they have a ton of interesting stuff on there. You can search the blog and find the subjects that pertain to you. So it's all about helping you find a way to research the problem, because it's just so dense, all this stuff. There's so much information here. Let's move on to the first slide. How come sometimes, there we go. Let me see something here. Here we go. Don't think it's a weed until you ask the owner. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a strange statement to me, but yes, you should check in with your owners and, you know, maybe take a walk around, see how they feel about the plants that you might consider weeds. I mean, some people love the way mustard covers the hill and looks all yellow, but, you know, you would, because you're educated in invasives and things like that, you might have to educate them about why it's not such a great thing. Offer alternatives if they really like the way it looked. So weeds are basically plants that are in unwanted places. So sometimes, depending, we'll get into this, but even native plants can they can be weedy. So let's say a buckwheat that's reseeding in places where you don't want it to reseed in the, you know, in the little crevice of the sidewalk or something like that. And that's in that instance, you could call it a weed, but it's, it's in the place where you don't want it. So I think we've all kind of crossed that threshold where we understand that. And then some plants, even you hear people talk about certain native plants looking weedy. So weed control is essential for 1 year seeds, 7 years weeds. Yeah, so there's a little saying for you if you like those things. There are 2 factors that determine whether weeds will win. High propagule pressure, that's the seed bank that's in your soil. It's a fancy way of just saying seeds in your soil. High seed mass is the amount of seeds that a plant can produce. Certain plants do that quite well. So in this example, as I was talking about, Eriogonum, buckwheat, they have a high seed mass, and they germinate very easily. And so that's why they propagate so readily around your yard. Knowing these factors will help you think about how to establish a cultivated landscape, especially in the first 2 or 3 years. So weeds, just like your wildflower seeds, need the sun, soil disturbance, and water. So they all need the same thing. So that's, you can see that could be problematic. We'll talk about how to reduce the soil disturbance as you're pulling weeds. Let's see. Techniques for weed control. Mechanical. So first is you just pull the weed out. That's one thought. New theories of weed control tell us that pulling weeds, especially when using a fork or trowel, simply disturbs the soil and brings up new weed seeds. I would say, if you're conscientious about doing it, you can avoid doing this to a large extent. You can be very careful. You can get that prong down in there and loosen that root and still get it up without making a major disturbance of the soil. It's something to think about when you're pulling weeds. So instead of just pulling and yanking and throwing the dirt all over the place, this might make you think about how you do that. There are other ways of, let me just see what the next slide is. Okay, so, mechanical means, I guess, you're the machine. And then you can also you can snip the weed at the root level. There's some people that think that's a good approach. So you snip it at the base and gradually, then you let the weed come back up. And the goal is to have the weed exhaust itself over time, and then it just runs out of energy to rejuvenate itself. I don't know. I don't do that. I pull the weeds. I like to get rid of it, and I'm careful. And you got to be careful. So the other thing is, you have to be careful if the plant has gone to seed, that when you're pulling the weed, you don't distribute more seed by a jerking action or something. So if you're gentle, one way is you can snip it and then take a bag or some trash can and you just gently tip it over into the trash can. And then you can go at the root with vigor, but just yanking that. So weed, if it's especially if it's, dandelion type puffy weeds, you're just gonna distribute weeds all over the place, or seeds all over the place. Okay. I think you got it. Got to pull weeds sometimes. Cultural, this means mulch. As far as the first, I want to get this up here. I can't read it. There we go. As the first 2 years of the garden maintenance pass, note the coverage and depth of your mulch. Yeah, pull mulch away from stems and trunks of plants and trees. Check for signs of overwatering, mildews, molds in the mulch, particularly in shady areas. So this is almost getting into plant pathology, but really also you may want to rejuvenate that mulch to suppress the weeds, suppress the sun reaching the weed seed. And then also you want to be careful if you are pulling weeds, if you just lay those, if the plant has gone to seed and you're shaking the plant around by accident, it's just going to land on top of the mulch, which is going to make it really easy to reseed, depending on how thick the mulch is. Sometimes the mulch, you'll get the weeds that go on top of the mulch, and they're very easy to pull out. Love those. Now my Mac wants me to read. Okay. Soil solarization. Sorry, the way my screen is working is it seems to want to block some portion of what I need to read almost at all times. So let me see if I can reduce that. Nope. Okay. Soil solarization. Usually this is done before planting, but it may be used in spot conditions where a particularly difficult to eradicate weed is located in a distinct patch. So you do this before planting, when you're planning out your garden, when you're removing your lawn, whatever. If you decide not to do the LADWP program, you can, do it in various ways, right? First, clear above ground vegetation at the site and then thoroughly moisten the soil. Then cover the area with clear plastic sheet held in place with landscape staples and let it remain for 4 to 8 weeks, preferably during the hottest months of the year to cook the weed seeds. Does it mention in here? Yes, moisten the soil. So you're steaming them. You're steaming them to death. And so this is just, like I said, a lot of me talking. Has anybody done the soil solarization in this class? I'm seeing, so that's a no. I was kind of hoping somebody would say, yeah, I did it, and here's what I found. So stretch your plastic tight. There's just so much information in there about that. So if you're interested in that, you kill the seed bank, that's the goal. And you can find that information out there. UC Weed Science blog, for instance. Chemical, a last resort. Many popular herbicides based on glyphosate have been found to be detrimental to animal life, including human life. Please avoid them except under extreme cases. An example of an extreme case is a persistent case of crabgrass that is entangling itself in the roots of newly established native. This may need a bit of chemical control. Yeah, so one way, if that was, so we're talking about Roundup, folks. That's, and if you try to spray that anywhere that aerosol goes, anything it touches, it's pretty much going to kill. So you would want to be really careful about applying this. Yes, Beth Abels, we'll get to that. You want to be really careful about how you apply something like this. One approach is you get a plastic glove, and wet your fingers with the glyphosate and wipe it on the thing you're trying to remove. And then it will die. And hopefully you won't spread it to your plant that you want to save. So that's one thought. It also comes in foam form, which doesn't spray out as much. There's quite a bit of information about non-toxic approaches, for herbicides. So one pre-emergent herbicide, that's something you spray before weeds show up. You do it quarterly. You would need to water it in. And the issue is that it will also inhibit your wildflowers from growing. So you would want to do that selectively if you're going to apply that. Another thought, so there are also various organic botanical oils, and that's a whole deep dive you can get into. Has to do with clove oil and other concoctions. They're out there. They need hot weather and sun. So you apply it, hot weather, the sun, and whatever happens in there. And also, I forget the technical term, but many of those don't actually attack the root of the plant. So they kill the green parts, but the root isn't actually killed. So that's something to be aware of. You could think of it like a chemical way of snipping off the top of the plant, kind of like what we talked about. I could imagine maybe the plant you're hoping for exhaustion, that would just run out of energy to restore itself with that situation. Vinegar, salt, and soap is one that goes around. A lot of people use that for, I would be careful about applying that to the areas where I actually have plants, to soil. Because of the salt. So the salt can build up in your soil. We talked a little bit about that in a previous class, and you would want to be careful about applying too much salt to your soil. But in like a hardscape situation, sort of in the cracks of your sidewalk, things like that, it's pretty effective, actually. Yes, thank you, John. So the technical term I was looking for was non-systemic, but there's even another term, and I can't remember what it is. Yes. Oh, thank you, Sandra. Yes. So non-toxic. We don't even get into the lasagna mulch thing. Weed barrier. So you can use cardboard. I've used an old carpet, cardboard. You can use multiple layers of newspaper, things like that, to also inhibit weed growth. So those quick thoughts. UC Weed Science, check it out. Let's move on. Natives can be weedy. Like I was saying, California native plants can become invasive in certain situations as well. Do not be surprised if you find Rhamnia coulteri, Matilaha poppy, spreading its rhizomes outside the area you intended for it. Does anybody know what this red plant is here on the right?
Epilobium canum.
Yeah, some kind of epilobium. I'll go with that. So that's also a rhizomatic native plant that can spread to places where you don't want it. Rhamnia is especially if it's a happy, it can really spread out and fill a bed. So you can use that to your advantage, but you also might want to be careful about either having it in a place where it's contained or keeping it away from places where you just don't want it to get into. And it's a vigorous plant. You would have to dig out the rhizomes to try to stop it. Many Eriogonum species, that's buckwheat, can be free seeders as well. Look for seeds to sprout in mulch and even in decomposed granite pathways. Yeah, They're easy to take care of. Just snip the plants at the ground level. Epilobium, Oenothera, Sisyrinchium, and others reseed freely and become weedy if not controlled. Yeah, so just be aware. Let's see. Oh, something I didn't mention, a mechanical method is I use this diamond hoe. It's a hoe, the head is about that big. It's very thin, and you can just stand up there and you shave off the top of the weed. And that's a process of weed exhaustion, so to say. So you can sort of shave off the top of the weed. It's great for DG paths. It's great when you just have a mass. So we would have nettles. We had to clear out a lot of nettles. We would just use this diamond hoe to go after it, clear the nettles, and then they'd come back, and then we go after them again. So that's another method. There's just so many things out there. If you're looking for solutions, usually you'll find one. Okay. So just real quickly, that Eriogonum, and that's an example of high seed mass, whereas the Rhamnia and the Epilobium are examples of the rhizomatic thing like crabgrass, right? Integrated pest management principles as related to native plants. All right, so IPM is I'm going to read this in quotes, is an ecosystem-based strategy that focuses on long-term prevention of pests or their damage through a combination of techniques such as biological control, habitat manipulation, modification of cultural practices, and use of resistant varieties. So it's a holistic approach. It tries to keep the entire habitat of the garden in mind, and it works from tries to do the least possible harm. That's sort of the approach here. Becomes even more important when you're maintaining native gardens, as the major functional point of a native garden is its ability to support habitat, and over-reliance on chemicals works against this goal. Yeah, so if you start, using the chemicals, you start destroying it, maybe you're destroying something small that a larger thing would eat, and then, you start working up the food chain that way. IPM resources. The University of California's Integrated Pest Management website is a wonderful guide to the least toxic IPM treatments for home and garden pests that have crossed the threshold and require some type of management. So the threshold is how much you can tolerate. And it is an extensive website. So it is worth getting over there. And it doesn't just deal with native plants. This is just a whole a general approach to pest management in any garden. Okay. Sometimes the button works, sometimes it doesn't. Why? Okay. Interesting. Okay. Threshold or action level. One very important concept in pest management is threshold or action level. When does the pest population and subsequent damage reach a level that requires action? This threshold level can be very different for front versus backyards. If gardeners and landscapers can relax their pest threshold for a time, sometimes natural predators will often build up populations that will control the problem. Aphids is one example. Ants don't seem to be in that category. So the theory is you don't react to the first couple aphids, and you let them build up. Assess the plant. Is the plant hurting? We're going to get into how you do that. And then you just wait and watch, and you might start seeing those predatory insects show up, especially because you have native plants which attract the local fauna and insects, and you're more likely to have, you might possibly find that it's not a problem ultimately. So that's one sort of philosophical approach there. Okay, I press the button. This time I'm not going to press it again. Let me see what happens. Did it change? No, it didn't. There we go. Okay. Now I have to go back and make sure I didn't miss a thing. Okay, yeah, so 25%, somebody, I heard somebody say that they chose like 25%, how's this plant doing? Can I deal with 25% of this plant not looking great, and then that might be their sort of boundary about when to leap into action. Identifying the causes of plant health problems. There are environmental causes. Oh, I just wanted to throw out, this class is not going to make you an expert. The goal is to direct you to those places, like I said before, direct you to the places and resources where you can start to determine what's going on with your plant. So environmental causes, light. So this is general health, light, sun, shade, too much or too little causes poor growth conditions. This will change over time. Year 4 is about when you will notice the shade pattern change as trees such as Prunus ilicifolia start their growth spurt. So a lot of things can happen with light and shade. You put the wrong plant, you put a plant that wants light and shade, it's not going to do very well, and it might start it might get foliar diseases. It might just look sad, might not grow. You put a plant that wants shade in the sun, or your neighbor chops down their tree, or does some radical pruning, and all of a sudden that Ribes viburnifolium that was loving that shade is not loving it anymore because it's getting a lot more sun. So I've seen that at TPF, and it just gets burned. And so you got to keep in mind the requirements of the plant. Weather, so you could have an unusual storm, you could have an unusual heat event that can just kill a plant by burning it if you get a record heat, depending on where you are. Usually it's in the hotter areas where it gets up 110, 115. That can just wipe out a plant that was doing pretty well in full sun, but then it just burns the plant. So that's one thing. Yeah, and that's extraordinary events. So let's. Okay. Whoops. Yeah, see what happens? Cultural causes, use and abuse. So people stepping on your Achillea millefolium, your yarrow. That's one thought. Critters going by your brittle diplicus, your monkey flower, and just snapping it off. Careless people walking by. Somebody, I did it myself. I gave somebody a plant. They put it in a certain place. They're having a backyard party. I stepped right on the thing. It was their fault because they didn't mark it, right? No, I was, I just stepped on this plant. A really cool salvia too. And I felt kind of like an oaf. So that happens, right? So for example, in the parkway, John mentioned every 6 feet, leave a place for somebody to get out of their car so they can not step on your plants. On-site and off-site issues, I think I touched base on that. So not only could your neighbor chop down their tree or install a tree that now has a lot more shade there than it did before, they may also put in some new plants that they decide to start watering. What if they put in some carex or something right on the border where you have this manzanita, and they're just soaking that Carex, and it's a heavy soil, and everything was great for a while. Well, so that's another issue. Overwatering, that leads us to overwatering, the biggest cause of native plant failure. So you're always going to want, I think we talked a little bit about that last time. You're going to want to look at the plant and first examine the soil. Is it dry? Is it wet? You know, and start from that place. Overwatering is, yeah, people tend to rely on that once the plant looks, if the plant doesn't look the way they think it should look, or if you're experienced, you might not knee-jerk overwater. But a lot of people without a lot of experience tend to want to just dump a lot of water on the plant when it's not looking, and maybe it's just drought stressed and it's a hot day, and now's not the time to add that water. So that is something to keep in mind too. Okay. Did I miss anything? Yeah. Okay, past vertebrate and invertebrate. Let's move through here. Okay, so vertebrate animals, you know, breaking off your animals like this right here. I just stepped on that person's plant. I am a vertebrate that killed that person's plant. I'm a pest. So the animals, raccoons, you know, they dig around looking for grubs. Skunks too might do that. Possums, things like that. So, you know, you can always get a camera out there and see what's going on at night. That can be interesting. Invertebrate caterpillars. So that leads into, so if you're talking caterpillars, when you have a milkweed, you want caterpillars, you want them to eat the plant. Caterpillars on another plant, again, that's that sort of threshold of what you're willing to put up with. Doug Tallamy has a big thing about caterpillars and talking about the health of your garden. So it would be worth looking into his argument on that, as the caterpillars, in his a very quick summation, the caterpillars transfer the plant energy to the animal kingdom. And from there, so he talks about the health of your habitat, the health of the environment. And a lot of it is how many caterpillars do you have? So it's worth, I think, looking into that and educating yourself. Slugs, snails, all of that. And this is where the UC, the IPM approach comes in. Get on that website and start looking for solutions. Let's see, did I just do all the talking? Okay. Let's see. Okay, disease, generally viral, bacterial, or fungal. I just want to let you know, I also am learning these things. It's just such a widespread subject. It's just hard to grasp it all. So over time, you build up your understanding of these things if you don't have a lot of experience already, which I know some of you do. So you want to start looking at, so the diseases are generally viral, bacterial, or fungal. Symptoms, so you want to, so the symptom can have many different causes. And so you have to be careful about, you first identify the symptom, and then you can start tracking down the causes from there. But don't just assume that it's one cause. You know, there may be more than one thing that can cause that symptom. And so you have to be careful about that. Quickly, I need to look at my notes.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Let's quickly. Let's move on. So these diseases need this triangle to function. And the triangle is a susceptible host at the top. A pathogen has to be present, and then the favorable environment. And I'm not going to go through all these overlaps here, but if you have only two of those things, you're not going to have a problem necessarily. So oak root fungus requires an oak tree as a susceptible host. The fungus needs to exist in the soil, and the favorable environment would be watering at the base of the plant, or watering the soil in like a hot weather situation. So imagine you take out the fungus and you've got the oak getting watered in a hot. That's still not recommended, but you know you're not going to get oak root fungus. You might get something else. If you take out you can still, if you have the pathogen and the oak tree, and you don't create the causes for, you don't accelerate the cause of the problem by watering, then you won't have a problem. And then obviously, if you don't have an oak, although it can also, I think, get into Lionothamnus, which is the Catalina ironwood. So keep that in mind. Just because it's good to know what's in your soil, but if it's there, it would be good to me, it would be good to know, and then I would be careful about creating the conditions for that pathogen to accelerate. But it doesn't mean I wouldn't panic about it, you know? All right, so moving on. Here's how we describe plant health. So when you see a plant health problem, you look at the whole plant, and you start looking. I'm just going to read from notes here really quick so I don't miss anything. Okay, so you're going to want to describe the plant. Is it new? Is it adolescent, so to say, in its, maybe first year? And then, or is it mature? So I guess I would call it adolescent. Brand new might be the first 3 months. And then adolescent, depending on your native, might be something like 3 months to a year. And then mature would be more like a year or 2 years, depending on the plant. Main stem or branches. So if the problem is localized, describe the section and what is happening. Malformed new growth, section dieback, leaf drop, bark splits, or pitch on trunk. So like a resin on the trunk, or main branches. So one is, so when we get to scale, aphids, those are on the main stem usually. Some pests land on the foliage. So next is the foliage. How does it look? Describe the deformation, coloration, or material such as powdery substance on the leaves. Gall, we won't go into that. Is it powdery mildew? Is it black? Does it have a little web on it? Is the leaf crinkly? Is it attacking new leaves? Is it attacking all the leaves? Things of that nature. Flowers, how do the flowers look? Whether are there flowers? Are they deformed? And then lastly, the fruit. How does the fruit look? Is it deformed? Things like that. Fruiting failure, misshapen fruit. Okay, so that's how you, this is interesting. feel like some of these slides should have been swapped, because here we are talking about, God, make it stop. I'm trying to do this in the big presentation mode so you guys can see it really well. And it's kind of rejecting my attempts. Okay, IPM solutions to those plant issues that you saw that, you know, you're identifying those plants. One is biological control. Biological control is the use of natural enemies, predators, parasites, pathogens, and competitors to control pests and their damage. This is a whole thing. You know, a lot of us are aware of the lady. It's not a real bug. Some of us know that it's a lady beetle, and how they love to go after aphids. So that's just a quick example of the natural predators. Cultural controls. So cultural controls are practices that reduce pest establishment, reproduction, dispersal, and survival. So one thought is check your watering. You know, are you overwatering? Are you creating that situation where the fungus can happen? Are you, and then your airflow. So they natives generally would like more airflow, and if you're adding water onto a dense planting scheme, you can create that situation for various funguses and rots. So, and then depending on the pest, you could be creating a situation that encourages pests as well. Okay. Mechanical and physical controls. Mechanical and physical controls kill a pest directly, block the pests out, or make the environment unsuitable for it. So here they're showing us a trap, which is kind of a both, right? Actually, it's an ant bait. It's a bait station. So the animal goes in there, nibbles on the bait, and then depending on the bait, it may take it back to its nest, or it may just die from eating the bait. You know, you want to have that. Those are designed specifically for certain size, depending on what exactly you're looking for. That's why it's good to determine exactly what's going after your plants. And then you would use the appropriate, so that, you know, say a cat or something doesn't get in there, get into the poison. That's in this picture's case. You could also, you know, you can put screens up, things like that. You have to be careful, you know, once you start screening certain plants, then you lose some habitat. Birds can't get to them, things like that. You can use gopher cages. Some people have some, that's effective for some people. Some there's any number of physical barriers you can use. There's also like, oh, that's mechanical. So I don't know if we're going to get to this, but you can use like coyote or cougar pea. Comes, they have like chemical cougar pea. That's less invasive, less damaging. It smells really bad. I would recommend changing your clothes immediately, because you are going to smell like a cougar peed on you. It's not a good smell. So I put on one of those Tyvek suits and just spray and then take it off. So that, you know, sometimes it's, you combine things. You use the traps and use the cougar pea, and you can kind of like keep the population down to a certain extent. Chemical control. With IPM, you'll use the most selective pesticide that will do the job and be safest for other organisms and for air, soil, and water quality. Yeah, so do the least harm. Okay, where are we here? Do we have a time?
It's 5:51.
Perfect. Are there any questions?
Are you taking a break, Eric?
Yeah, I think we're about to take a break, little 5-minute break.
For anyone that still hasn't responded to my question, there's a few of you out there. Check your instant messages. I'll let you know. I'll be just cutting and pasting your name. So if you have an initial, a suffix, an initial with a period, an initial without a period, please let me know exactly how you want your name to appear and drop it in the chat. You can just send me a PM and I'll get that over now. I think there's maybe 5 of you that haven't responded. So I would appreciate it so I can get the certificates signed, well, printed and signed by the Saturday class.
Quickly, Nathaniel. So Have a Heart is a pest company that makes products, various traps, humane traps. They also make a lot of non-toxic chemical solutions, and they have a whole chart. Like if you're trying to get rid of deer, use this. If you're trying to get rid of, I don't know, cats, use this. And they have this whole grid matrix that you go through, and you can start finding those non-toxic solutions. All right, I'm gonna take a 5.
What did you say that was called? Have a Heart, or
Have a Heart, yeah. HAVAHRT. HART, I believe.
I will Google it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, I'll be back at 5:58. Count on it.
Brenda, just to confirm, the pruning workshop is 10:30, or it's on the 9th. There's 2 slots.
I'm not Brenda, but that's true. It's on the 9th.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Meryl. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Does anyone know like if natives commonly get pests compared to like other plants? You'd think that they wouldn't, or I'm not sure.
It depends on what you call a pest. A pest is something that you don't want there, but in the grand scheme of things, what you're planting is food, and you're planting food for insects, which are food for birds, which are foods for other predators. It's very common to find aphids on milkweed. Yeah, it's common.
Will
It's
it kill
just,
the plant?
no.
Okay, to me, if it doesn't kill or harm the plant, it's not a pest, right?
Right, but that you also have to, we do like the rule of thumb, stand far enough away to where your thumb covers whatever it is you're looking at it. And from that distance, if your plant is visibly stressed, there's an issue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I was taking a walk and one of the cottonwoods had a lot of leaf miners. Evidence of leaf miners when you get up close. You get far enough away to cover it with your thumb. It's healthy. It's fine.
Got it. Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Brenda, are you talking about the native milkweed or the tropical one with the colorful flowers?
Native milkweed. We do not talk about non-natives here.
No,
Shh, they don't exist.
because they killed the aphids killed my tropical non-native milkweed.
And that doesn't make me sad.
No, I know, right? I know. I literally just
good.
learned about that, the native
Yeah.
milkweed. So I'm taking all my tropical one out of the
You
garden.
don't have to take it out. Just make sure that you cut it down during the winter, because it's not the actual milkweed that's harmful. It's the PO, something Phytophthora. I can't even say it. It's a fungus in the plant that when the caterpillars eat it, it inhibits wing
Growth?
Development?
Development, that's the word I'm thinking for. Because right now I'm thinking in Spanish, so I'm sorry. It's desarrollo, and I had to translate that real quick and it got stuck somewhere in the middle. Desarrollo, the development of their wings, and they come out with what's called crushed wing syndrome. It has a name, and their little wings are all shriveled up and
Oh,
ugly.
wow.
And that's because of the fungus. It's not the plant itself, it's the fungus. And then
Oh.
because tropical milkweed stays around during winter, when we get our rains, that's what happens. So just cut it down. Cut it down.
Okay.
Take it out if you want, but cutting it down is just as good.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Right. So here we are at 6 o'clock. Let's talk about vertebrates. Hey kids, let's talk about vertebrates. Share screen.
And while we're waiting for Eric, Nathaniel put in something, it discourages the monarch migration. Yeah, it does, because it throws off their reproductive cycles.
I took a class about the milkweed, and I thought I remember something about it being a vector for mites. And then
Yeah,
the mites
that's
are then
the
the vector for that fungus.
for the as far as I know, it's just what's the PO, Eric? What does that stand for? Phytophthora?
Phytophthora?
Something.
I don't know. It's
Yeah.
again, I have to do the research every time. So
Yeah.
it's like there's just so much to know.
We have notes. We have lots and lots of notes for every subject.
Notes. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk pests and conditions. Come on. Okay, vertebrates. We got into that just real quickly. So gophers, cats, skunks, and possums may inhabit your garden. Outdoor cats are a large factor in the breakdown of natural cycle of life in your local habitat. Yeah, I guess they can hunt the lizards, they can hunt the birds, and I have heard people, and I haven't researched it because I just don't want to know. I've got 2 cats that go out in my yard and they do what they're gonna do because I just can't keep, I'm not gonna keep indoor cats. So they go out and that's my own approach, but it's my yard. And they probably get into Nathaniel's yard too. So sorry about that, Nathaniel. So they can break off plants, like I said. Gophers like tap roots. They love mallows. I hear that they will avoid smelly shrubs. There's, gosh, there are long chats about how to go after gophers. One of the ways is to use a gopher trap. That's a cinch trap down below. They're kind of spooky. I set them a lot, and they're spooky. You got to keep your fingers out of the way because they'll just snap it right off. So that's effective. There's a whole strategy on how to do that. And you got squirrels, and there's so many things. So again, like a have a heart site, they'll give you your options for addressing those various vertebrates. Insects. So yeah, so obviously we get insects in our gardens, and this is just a reminder that maybe not all insects are something you want to chase away. This is Cercis occidentalis, western redbud, and you can see these circular incisions on the leaf, and that is from a leafcutter bee. So a leafcutter bee is solitary, non-stinging soil dweller. And they're great pollinators because the pollen doesn't stick to them quite as much as a honeybee. So it actually falls off where it needs to go. So it's just an example of, if you weren't attuned to this sort of thing, you might consider that to be, a really bad scenario in your garden. And once you learn and see, so if you use the IPM, you would learn this on the website, the UC IPM website, and you can go, and we'll have it up on the screen. So, but it's IPM diagnostic tool, and we'll get into that. So you would say, what's wrong with my Cercis? And you do all the stuff, and then you find out, oh, it's a leafcutter bee. This is a native thing. So maybe I should just leave it alone. Form LA has some great sort of blog posts about, if you got critters in your garden, then you're doing something right. And be careful again before you start trying to eradicate them. So just a pitch for the leafcutter bee and other things you might not know about. Let me make sure. Okay. Argentine ants. I think it was Maggie. Maggie, were you dealing with Argentine ants?
Yeah, I'm still struggling with that, but
Yeah.
hoping it's working.
So these ants place insects like scale and aphids all over the roots of native plants, which literally suck the life out of the plant from below. Yeah, and they're small. All this information, I'm not going to go too far into it because it's all in your handout. You can read up on them, but they're small, non-biting. They're a lot smaller than, I don't know what we call the standard garden ant that we see around here. Does anybody know? Okay, me neither, obviously. So yeah, they create the little honeydew and then they feed on that. Also, I mentioned Greg Rubin, so not on your list is Greg Rubin, who's a pretty well-known native plant designer. He's written a couple books, and he has some information to say about Argentine ants. So some real experience from an expert. I would recommend checking that out. Okay, I've clicked. Aphids. Fun fact that's not in your handout, aphids are born pregnant. There you go. So sleep well. Ants harvest and keep aphids in a group on certain plants. Aphids are small sap-sucking insects, may be seen on ceanothus, mallows, milkweed, and Encelia plants. Yes, so there are various ways to go after the aphids. Again, wait till it hits that threshold where you're just like, I think this is damaging the plant, but a couple aphids may not be the thing. Maybe, that might be a little bit of Google research. And then one thing you can do, you can use a toothbrush. We use toothbrush with alcohol. You can use a strong, okay, so let's be clear. Aphids on your milkweed, do not sweat it. Just let them be, okay? That is straight from the Xerces Society, XERCES. They have some sort of, again, a threshold of when it might be damaging to the plant, but it's like a very, very high threshold. So don't sweat the oleander aphid that's on your milkweed. It's not going to spread to other plants. These are different kinds of aphids, and I don't know their names. You can spray them off with a strong stream of water, and then their little mouth parts stay stuck onto the plant. Here's another cute fact about aphids, and then the aphid dies. So there's that. That may be successful. You can use Dawn soap, a toothbrush soaked in Dawn soap, and you rub it on. Actually, it's so the Dawn soap is a thing that you can go after the ants with, and then you rub the stems of the plant with a toothbrush soaked in alcohol. We use this frequently at Theodore Payne. Then once you clean everything off, it's all dry and everything, then you can try some neem oil to try to make the plant less appealing to the aphids. And then so it's a whole, again, there's a lot of aspects to chasing down aphids and ants. Scale, a variety of bumpy, hard-shelled insects that seem stationary and can have been, I don't know what that is, but can be farmed by ants. Adults can be very hard to remove. Yeah, so yeah, they can also look, they can be white, sort of brown, black, and sometimes it just looks like part of the stalk itself. So you rub the stalk a little bit and see with your fingernail, and you can kind of see if they come off. There are a few, again, toothbrush with the alcohol, you can rub it off and then apply neem oil. I'm sure there's other approaches as well. Thrips, slender, minute, pale to blackish. So short antennae. Wings, when present, are 4 in number, long and narrow, legs short, mouth parts are sucking. I think it would be really difficult to determine all of that from this picture. And this is a pretty good close-up of a leaf. So imagine, you'd have to get your jeweler's loupe down there, which could be a lot of fun, your microscope, and examine what exactly you're dealing with. But you could also go to the UC IPM diagnostic tool, start to describe where it is on the plant, what's it look like, things like that, and then it's going to give you a few options about what it might be. And that's kind of how I would approach that. So one thing, so apparently a strong jet of water can help you on this. You can also just prune off the part that is giving you problems. So if it's, as long as you're clearly not defoliating entirely the tree, but if it's just a small section, you might just clip off that that branch or whatever it is you're dealing with, you know, if it seems reasonable. Okay. Mealybug. Elongated oval insect with well-developed legs, body covered with a waxy white secretion, look like slender snowflakes. And they can kind of build up and look like almost like a powdery mildew. Sometimes you'll see individuals. These usually come with ants as well. So the ants like the mealybug or the secretions that the mealybug make. Again, it's like a toothbrush, alcohol, Dawn soap for the ants, and then some neem oil. There are probably, again, there are always other thoughts. A bark beetle. So bore into bark or wood, small holes will be seen on the bark surface. Yeah, so they inhibit the trees from getting their moisture, and that's how the tree dies. Many types of, there are many types of bark beetle, and yeah, I think most of us have heard the devastation they've caused. And I don't think there's any, once you get a bark beetle, there's really nothing you can do. That tree is gone. Shot hole borer. If you see small wet stains on trunks, they're most likely signs of a fatal disease that is spreading throughout Southern California at an alarming rate. Okay, shot hole borer. So when you see this, we have some trees on site that are suffering from this, some alders, and they're goners. This is just very, over here is the frass, which is the, you know, the poop of the shot hole borer. And then here's the little, yeah, here you go, elder. There's the little pattern that they create in there. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to cut down the tree. And then that gets into a whole thing on how to, okay. This would require research, but know that you're not supposed to transport a diseased tree, okay? If it's dead and you've chopped it down, you need to look up the responsible way of dealing with it. Hopefully, if you're using a tree service, they know the proper way to do it. But from what I understand, you're supposed to keep that tree on site and dispose of it, you know, either through fire or chipping, which seems a little but you will need to look it up. So the goal here is for you to be aware that if you have a diseased trees, you do not want to transport it. If you have a diseased oak, you chop it up for firewood, you're not supposed to take that out of your house and go to the campsite and use it, because that's how the various diseases spread. Okay, I clicked, I'm waiting. Rust is a catch-all term for a large group of fungi. They're spores, they need moisture to germinate. So you might, if you're getting rust, again, you want to check your irrigation, how the water is applied, how much, again, the spacing of your plants, airflow, things like that. You can clip off the offended, the suffering branch, and you can apply sulfur, apparently, a powdery sulfur to it to try to reduce it. And yeah, again, you can defoliate, like cut the section that's giving you a problem. Waterborne diseases. So Phytophthora is a soil pathogen causing crown and root rot on plants, favors wet conditions with poor drainage. So sticky monkey flowers. This is odd because it's in black and white. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on with the color of the plant. Well, it's almost impossible, actually. And that would give you some information just looking at the color of the plant, because if, you know, I think what they're showing is healthy on the left, Phytophthora on the right, And most likely that Phytophthora plant is fully green and looking very, very sad, dead. So it's not looking like a dormant Diplicus. And that's something to keep in mind. So kind of wish this was in color so we would be able to tell a little more clearly. Sudden oak death is a Phytophthora. Again, you want to reduce the conditions that encourage. So overwatering your oak, overwatering your Diplicus can create this. It's in the soil, and there's some concern about it in nurseries, and nurseries passing on Phytophthora. So I don't know since what year, but this is a known issue, and nurseries are supposed to be very careful about how they use buckets basically, and the soil that they're using to grow your plants. So at Theodore Payne, we don't reuse. This is not a pitch for Theodore Payne. I'm just saying this is how one of the ways that we combat this. So we use fresh soil on every plant. We don't reuse our soil. And then we, if we reuse buckets, we sterilize them. We have this big machine that makes all kinds of noise, and we use that to clean the recycled buckets. And then yeah, and then you have to be careful, because if you store your plants on the ground for too long, if Phytophthora is in the ground, it can be sucked up into the plant. So that's kind of spooky. So don't create the conditions, reduce the conditions that are favorable to these diseases. Powdery mildew, whitish gray patches on leaves, stems, and flower buds. Again, reduce your water, cut off the pieces or the stems or leaves that are giving a problem. Like hummingbird sage, when it gets the mildew and the white stuff on it, sometimes we just cut off the leaves and remove them from the area, and that's the solution of the thing. And then you space out the plant so it can get some more air. That's one thought. That's just, plants in pots closely spaced in our situation. Yeah, apparently you can use sulfur to combat this as well, because okay. So IPM programs, these IPM principles and practices are combined to create IPM programs. So you create an IPM program, I guess, for your site, which might be appropriate or not, depending on your what the site is. While each situation is different, 6 major components are common to all IPM programs. Clicked, waiting. Pest 1, pest identification. Remember that what might be considered a pest in old-fashioned gardening techniques is actually part of the living habitat in native gardens. So be aware of that. Look into what this pest is and find out, is this going to be a problem? And once you get, of course, yes, if you get the shot hole borer, yeah, your tree is a goner. But if you have aphids, that's a different thing, where you might actually be creating a habitat situation with, predatory insects may eventually show up. Monitoring and assessing pest numbers and damage. Check plants regularly to spot problems before they get out of hand. Consider waiting until a season has gone by to see if your natives can recover on their own. Yeah, this might be especially appropriate for smaller plants. And then also, I know that we get like spider mites on one of our Arctostophilus, and I was all up in arms and telling Tim, who's the director of horticulture, and he says, yeah, it happens. The plant doesn't really seem to be suffering. The plant's not dying, so we kind of just let it ride. So there's that too. And you, again, it's the level, he has a pretty high tolerance for imperfections, you know, your client or you maybe feel differently. Guidelines, okay, number 3, guidelines for when management action is needed. So in your plan, be slow to act, take good notes with photos of your natives. Also note whether certain combinations of natives can reduce overabundance of certain insects. Interesting. Remember that Asclepius will attract aphids and caterpillars and their foliage will be decimated. That is how it should work. Yeah, so the caterpillars will feed on the aphids supposedly, but they definitely eat the plant down. And just know that. And most people who are growing milkweed know that. Preventing pest problems. Taking steps before there is an issue. Space your natives and mulching in between. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Space your natives properly. Keep the mulch off the crown. Don't overwater. I have clicked. I am waiting. Wow. Use a combination of management tools, biological, cultural, physical, mechanical, and chemical. Yeah, so you may just have to use a multi-pronged approach in your quest to understand. First, understand, right? First, understand what's going on and then go into action if needed. Assessing, I think this is number 6 here. Assessing the effect of pest management. Take your time. Not only are you looking to see if the infestation has abated, but did you do any corollary damage? Are the butterflies still there? Check for small mammals. They have a place in the habit too. So you try something out and you kind of wait and see what's happening, you know, and again, you could combine that with time. Oh, well, of course it's combined with time, but you might think about how long at the time you're willing to see if this works, you know. You could also imagine that the season may have something to do with it. So, you know, there's a lot of factors. Pest approaches, it's complicated, you know. And then, you know, here's another thing that I really wish, you know, because actually a lot of you, I bet, have experience with various pests and foliar diseases. And this is the part that I really wish you guys could just, we could just roundtable this to a certain extent, because it's, you know, it's just, that's how we learn. We learn from other people's experience. I mean, as well as doing that research, but really like what worked, what didn't work, you know? So I would encourage you guys, you know, if there's any way, like when we have those in-person meetings, really get to know each other a little bit and exchange information. Services that may be offered on a fee basis. Spring weed cleanup. Okay, so we're back to weeds. If there's been a heavy winter rain, know that your clients may need extra help with cleanup of annual weeds. Yeah, it's important. So that's the 1-year seeds, 7-year weeds thing. And then it's important to let your client know, if you have a client, or, you know, if you're the person, that just because you eradicated the weeds this year, it doesn't, you know, when the seed bank is again stimulated by soil, sun, and rain, you'll get a refresh of those weeds. And depending on the seed bank and when you got them last time, you may have less, you may have fewer, you may have to go at this just year after year after year. And I'll tell you this, mustard is really hard to get rid of. I mean, it's not so hard in a small garden, but if it's in a large area, it can be really hard to get rid of it, you know, because it's just the high propagule pressure. So yeah, that would be a thing of advance notice. Hey, in a year, you're going to want me to come back here and go after these weeds, unless you have a do-it-yourselfer on your hand. Okay, here's our resources. University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources statewide integrated pest management program. It's in your book. If you, and then, so you can just type in UC IPM. It's going to come up. And then here's our diagnostic tool down below. You can type in IPM diagnostic and it will show up in Google. So let's look at something. So I'm told this is a culinary sage. I didn't take this picture, but it has powdery mildew. And imagine that we're going to imagine this is a hummingbird sage, but it could be a culinary sage, doesn't matter. You know, we have mixed gardens. So here's how I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna find yeah, okay. Escape. Okay, here's the weed science blog. That's what it looks like. I searched solarization. There's a whole list of stuff on solarization. And then
Can you
along
please
with,
share your screen?
oh, I'm not sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Share. Google Chrome. You see weed science. Share. There it is. So that's the weed science blog. So I searched solarization and then different subjects came up. Non-chemical strategies for weed control and weed seed germination, all that stuff. So you can do deep dives if you want to. And then let me see, I'm gonna unshare because I need to look for the, oh, okay, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna share. What time do we have? Oh, we got lots of time. Okay. There we go. All right. That's fine. I'm going to type in Google. This is the site. LT, you have a question?
Yeah, or a comment about
Yeah.
it's more an idea or suggestion, but when you're talking throughout the lesson, you've been talking about the weeds, and I guess I want to say that some weeds for herbalists are food, like they love weeds, and I think there would be this cool idea if, like, when a garden or a landscape designer needs to weed in quotes, they could hook up with like a group of herbalists who use these weeds such as nettles, dandelion, like whatever, that are so healthful, mustard, like they could come and, harvest them. And I don't know, it's just like a weird crazy idea that I feel like could be helpful. I don't know exactly how to go about it, but I just wanted to share that because weeds are what some people term weeds are like really, really helpful for us. So
I totally agree. Not weird at all. In fact, it's you're conscious of what's going on, and that there are people that these weeds, right? The weeds were in quotes before, right? It's the plant that's not in a place where you want it, right? Dandelions originally brought over here as a food source, and yet, invasive, right? But you can also eat them. And then, so yeah, hooking up, that could make for really interesting stuff with if you have a client or your own house. Yeah, it's a great point. So have the big picture, please. Yeah, I know a lot of you do already. So here's me. Any other comments, questions before we get into this diagnostic? Okay, so all I did was Google IPM diagnostic tool, and here it is, top top thing. You guys can see my screen, right? My browser. Okay, now I'm going to click on that. Here's our opening page, plant types. I'm going to click on plant types, and then we got flowers, fruit, trees, nuts, berries, trees, shrubs, vegetables, and melons. Trees and shrubs. Because it's not a vegetable, it's not a fruit tree, not a flower. Okay, so trees and shrubs are selective. Plant names, oh boy. So oddly, they use some common names and then some scientific names. So you can figure it out. Here's bird of paradise, for example. That's a great picture of it, isn't it? It really looks like a bird. So we're going with salvia. There it is, right in the middle. Add to my list. Boom. If you're not sure what it is, I guess you could have multiple plants, or if the issue is affecting multiple plants, that would be interesting, right? You know, it might not be strictly, so that might be some kind of predator that you're dealing with. Plant parts, is it affecting the buds? No. Flowers, blossoms, not sure, but I doubt it. Fruit, probably not. Leaves, yes. Overall, hard to say. Shoots, twigs and branches. We could say overall and see what shows up. It just gives you more. And then so these pictures are a little kind of like, they may not pertain exactly to what you're dealing with, but it's a way to, use that along with the description and do your best. Curled, cupped, folded, nope. Leaves deformed, distorted, dwarf, nope. Discolored, necrosis, discolored, yeah, kind of discolored. Remember, we're doing the hummingbird sage, the powdery mildew. If you didn't know what that is, clearly you know what it is. Now we're just using this for an example of how to get through the website. Leaves drop, cling to the branches, no, not really. Galls, no. Swell, rough, no. Powdery, cottony growth, yes. Specks, flecks, dots, kinda, sorta. I'm gonna say no. Spores, pustules, no. Spots, blotches, lesions, mottled, sorta. Yeah, maybe. Leaves, sticky, sooty. Let's just add that just to make it more complicated. Overall stunted, slow growth. Overall weak, wilted, collapse. No, not really. All right, here we go. And on here we see aphids, leaf spot diseases. Many fungi cause leaf spot diseases on different hosts. Oh, look at here, powdery mildew or rust. So then you have to go through and kind of like ID what it is. And it wouldn't even hurt, then clearly they don't have an exact picture here of a salvia with that issue. So you might Google and then look at the images, see if that matches. And then you're using this list to discern if this is the proper issue. And then susceptible plants, different fungus, and then it gets into how to combat it. Okay, so cultural practices, fungicide, you can use watered down milk, apparently. That works. Generally, I just cut the leaves off if I think it's really bad. Sulfur. So that's just a quick example of how to use this website. It's super handy. So any questions? We're going to end early, but I just thought maybe we'd use this time to talk a little bit about your experiences with various issues. Maggie, how's that Argentine ant issue coming along?
I think it's working because I have some new growth on some of the plants that were affected. So that was a really good sign.
Oh yeah, that's encouraging. And what did you do again?
I found an article about how to control it, and unfortunately, it's pesticides. So I sprayed the perimeter of the area to create a barrier so that they don't come in from the outside.
Right.
And then I used a solution to drench the root balls. I watered it deeply one day, and then the next day I drenched it with this solution of pesticide I added into that solution a fertilizer to kind of give the plant a boost. And it's all outlined in this article that I found, and it seems like it might be working. And the other thing I did was I used ant bait stations to so you spray the perimeter of the area, and then you use the ant bait stations so that they'll take, and this sounds so awful, but I couldn't, the whole thing was dying, the whole yard.
What was the plant again?
I lost about 6 plants in the garden, Arctostaphylos and I'm drawing a blank on the names. I lost about 6 plants over a number of months, and I finally figured out what was going on. But the other piece is the ant bait stations, and the ants, you kind of set it up so that they come across it in their like foraging trails,
Right.
and they feed on it and then take it back to the nest and kill the queen. So it's like a severe ant problem. So I decided to go ahead and do the pesticide route to see if I could save the whole yard.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And like when we lose manzanita, that's just a killer. They just grow so slowly, and they're
so
just
heartbreaking.
so much a highlight a lot of the time of a garden, that when losing one of those is just like, man.
Yeah, I can't even remember all the ones that I lost. It's actually in my own yard, and it's a pretty small yard. So I decided to give it a try and see. And then I had some clients call me to say that they had some symptoms that sounded like the ants also, and it's also here in the area in Sunland.
Right.
I'm in Tahunga.
Yeah.
And so I think the ants are really bad here,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, Maggie, I did basically the same thing you did, and I did a couple of other things. Sometimes you'll find that there's a really big concentration of the ants, kind of subterranean chambers. So you got to apply a drench.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I did too is, I did almost exactly the same thing you did, but I also looked for other pathways and snipped off the branches in any way that the ants could get onto the plants. And then I used sticky foot at the base of the plant as well. It's like these Argentine ants are just all over California. They're called mega colony or something like that.
All the way down to South America, yeah.
So you got to do a multi-prong approach. And even then I was still battling them. So I ended up having to take out a few plants to create just basically some room for more air. That was part of the problem. It was just, combination of too many plants and then the ants. So that I had to do pretty much the same thing you did.
Yeah, the tanglefoot I haven't tried, but I noticed that they're crawling all over a vine that I have, and I stuck the ant baits, comes with this tape, you can stick it on there, but then the rats are chewing up the ant bait stations. It's hard plastic. It's not a joke, and they smell the bait in there, and then so I had to weigh down the ant bait stations with big rocks, and that seems to be working so that they can't see them and find them.
One other thing is, I haven't done any research yet, but oh God, what's his name? It just escaped me. The mushroom dude, the guy that does everything with mushrooms. Anyways, thank you, Stamets. Yes, thank you. Supposedly he's working on some specific fungal species that go after insect pests.
Oh, nice.
So you may want to do a little research there as well.
I will. What's his last name?
Well, it's Paul Stamets.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. So actually, that's awesome. Anybody else want to share maybe one more success story or what you're battling right now? This is basically what the homework's going to be, I think. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's hear about it. Since we have some time, and next week we might not have the time. No? Okay.
I could share that for the aphids and all those other things.
Yeah.
I tried many things, soap and milk and all of that stuff, but what works always the best is just to spray them with water, and then with your hand, you kind of just, go through the leaves and the stems, and then you just get rid of them. And you do that a couple of times, and then your problem is solved. Takes a little bit of time, but I think that it's, just spraying with soap or water, milk or stuff like that, it just doesn't really do anything. In a few days they're back.
Yeah, I think you have to dislodge the thing a lot of the time, and that's a great example of like just spraying it with some pesticide or something may not be and maybe the answer, but you also just putting a little of that time in and removing them yourself, you have a healthier garden, right?
Yeah, I also would advocate for thinning out plants to allow more to kind of like get rid of some of the over moisture and let some air in, let some heat in. I found that to work pretty well.
Try it out. Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so let's let me just, in the interest of getting you guys out of here early today. Whoops, whatever I did there, that's not what I wanted to do.
Can I ask a quick question about the milkweed?
Sure.
I heard you say not to treat it. Did that include the spraying of water, the pressure?
Yes, because if you're spraying, you may have an egg on there, like on the milkweed. If you spray the plant, you got a really good chance of dislodging the egg. Also, the caterpillars can be hard to see, and you could lose a caterpillar that way. So it's not really detrimental to the plant. The caterpillars most likely going to eat up the plant before, especially if they're small, eat up the plant before the aphids do. And then I've also heard, I've tried to verify this, it's kind of iffy, that the caterpillars may feed on the aphids as well. So spraying it just creates, it kind of takes away the goal of having the milkweed in the first place.
Thanks for verifying. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay, so homework. We're gonna skip the top part of the homework. It has, I don't know, it's not working for me. So use the UC/ANR IPM website and or DOS diagnostic tool to investigate a pest issue you're seeing in the garden and note IPM strategies to manage it. Pretty straightforward. So maybe not the Argentine ants, Maggie, since you've already done all this work. I'm sure you can find something to look at.
I can.
Yeah, so there are other issues, and you know what? It's great if you can do it on a native, but hey, if you got a rose or an orange tree with issues, or citrus tree, feel free. Yeah, anything. Just the goal is to start to learn how to use this IPM diagnostics to do the least possible harm in your garden. Okay, so that's pretty clear, right? Please send me your homework. Please, 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 please send me your homework. Yeah, So I think we'll call it. And thanks everyone for your participation and hanging out and your comments. Yeah. Isn't that all participation? So good night. Is there anybody left from the
Good night.
PF? Okay, there we go. Okay.
Thanks, Eric. This is
Yes.
great.
Good night. Okay,
you, Eric.
everybody go away so I can talk to Anjali really quickly.
And I'm still here.
And Makita, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I need my lights on.
There we go. Oh, yeah. Okay. We're gonna do, oh, no, that's not what I want. I'm gonna unshare this screen. I'm still like, it's kind of silly that I'm telling you every time I'm doing something.
Oh, I've just been working on.
I'm sitting in my chair. I'm moving my mouse. Yeah. Okay, I just like to check in and say hi and bye to everybody. So
Right.
it was good, made sense, I hope.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Okay.
I love pampas grass. I just think
Yeah.
they're so pretty. So
Yeah.
while you were talking, I was looking at, okay, is this something possible? I saw one in my neighborhood and like the thing is huge. I'm like, it might be overwhelming to put in your yard, but it's pretty to see.
Yeah, I know. So they call that one of the most invasive plants. I'm on the fence about it. I'd have to read about really the reasoning behind it. I think if you were next to a wild area, that would be when you'd want to be really careful about using that. You know, if you're, you know, or in a near a lot, even a vacant lot or something.